So last time in this 3-part series, I made this gingham shirt into a Sandy Liang-inspired shirt, and this boxy short sleeve shirt into a Cecilia Benson-inspired shirred shirt. Now for our final guy, I'm going for something more easygoing, kind of girly, yet still utilitarian. I find the classic Ganni shirts that everyone loves to be the perfect fit, but I want to make a slightly different version and looking to something with this Ganni top that has the tie around belt to really accentuate the waist a bit more. I started by cutting up the entire shirt first this time, as this of course is a much easier thing to do first. I self-drafted a simple close-fitting bodice with a side dart, which I cut out. Sewed in the darts and pressed down. Then attaching the shoulders together, and then the sides of the back and front bodice piece. I then measured from my waist down to my upper hip to find the length of the sort of skirt part, which was about 16 centimeters. I cut from front and back of the shirt, keeping the buttons and buttonholes intact. I cut up as many strips of this size that were left from the bodice and attached them together to form one long piece to gather later. So I did end up taking from the sleeves as well and opening those bottom pieces up to use to attach to my skirt part. I really used every single piece of this shirt that was left. I pinned together everything and stitched down. To form one long strip. To save length on the skirt part, I just overlocked the bottom and hemmed it with a small top stitch. I then started cutting out all the strips that I needed to make the ties for the front as well as for the belt. I needed quite a lot of centimeters of fabric, so I needed to cut up as much of this shirt as I possibly could and was using every little bit of the shirt that was left and usable. So I sewed a few pieces together for the belt and then pressed it in half and sewed down. Then flipped it inside out. And top stitched. I repeated this process for the other ties until I had all the strips I needed. Since I didn't have enough fabric to make them the same length, I decided that at least the top tie should be longer than the middle one, and decided to make this a design choice. Then I moved on to the skirt part and started gathering that up. To attach the skirt, I needed to assemble the belt loops as well, which I made by pressing in half. And then in half again. And then sewed down with a top stitch. And then cut up into 3 equal parts. Before actually attaching the bottom part, I realized I needed to bind the top half now, since the bottom part was not going to have binding as I was using the button placket piece of the shirt. After sewing down the binding to the front of the shirt, I realized that I needed to add the ties at this point, so I just unpicked the part of the bias where the ties would go and then inserted them in. And then snipped along the curved neckline to prevent bulk, finishing off with a top stitch on the bias binding. Now I could finally assemble the bottom part to the top, and after pinning it down, I marked out where I wanted my belt loops to go and inserted them in. Then flipped the shirt and marked where I was going to sew down the belt loops to the right side of the shirt. I sewed down the bottom skirt part to the top and then did a tacking stitch to secure the belt loop in place on the right side of the shirt. For the sleeves, I wanted to add puff sleeves, so I marked out where my gathering stitches should go, and once the gathering was set, I attached the sleeve back to the bodice. I wanted to add a cuff to the sleeve, so I marked out a comfortable size of a strip, which I sewed into a ring, pressed in half, and then attached right sides together with the top half of the cuff meeting the bottom half of the sleeve. I then folded the cuff in on the inside, secured down with pins, and then moved the pins to the right side of the shirt so I could do a stitch in the ditch. Last step is just to add the belt to the belt loops, and then we're done. This was somehow the easiest shirt to make, yet somehow the one that had the most steps to it. I think it's because this time I finally got the bodice drafting right, so that really felt like a win. I think I might end up changing the front ties though, as I, on second thought, don't really like the different sizes of the ties. So my plan is to remove the middle tie and add a hook and eye closure instead, and then I can add the extra length to the belt instead. But overall, I'm really happy with this and hope you enjoyed watching this. Let me know which one you like the most of these 3 shirts, and I'll see you in my next one.